The backlash was immediate and vicious. Photos of Lyra's transformation during the demonstration went viral, with headlines screaming about alien infiltration and deception. Conservative media painted her as a threat. Liberal outlets debated the ethics of workplace relationships, and social media exploded with opinions from people who knew nothing about either of them. Cameron's uncle, Richard Sterling, who sat on the board, called an emergency meeting. He had always resented that Cameron inherited control instead of Richard's own son, and now he saw his opportunity. "This relationship undermines everything Sterling Tech stands for," Richard argued to the assembled board. "Cameron promoted this woman based on personal feelings, not merit. He's making decisions with his heart instead of his head, and it's damaging our reputation." "Lyra's division has produced more innovations in 3 months than the rest of R&D has in a year," Cameron countered. "The relationship came after her promotion, and her results speak for themselves." "The optics are terrible," another board member said. "Investors are nervous. We've had 3 major clients express concerns." Outside Sterling Tech's headquarters, protesters gathered. Anti-alien groups held signs about species purity and keeping Earth human. Lyra received death threats through social media, messages so violent that Cameron hired personal security for her. One evening, Lyra found Cameron in his office, staring at financial reports with a grim expression. "Talk to me," she said. "We're losing contracts," he admitted. "Not because of the technology, but because of us. Richard is pushing the board to give me an ultimatum: end the relationship or step down as CEO. Lyra felt her heart sink. "I'll resign. Today. I'll make a statement that we're ending things, that it was all a misunderstanding." "No," Cameron said fiercely. "I'm not letting them bully you out of your career or out of my life." "But the company will survive or it won't. But I won't survive losing you to save a boardroom full of people who care more about appearances than actual innovation." Lyra moved to him, taking his face in her hands. "You've spent your whole life proving yourself to these people. I can't be the reason you lose everything." "You're not the reason," Cameron said. "Their prejudice is, and I'm done accommodating it." But that night, lying awake beside him, Lyra made her own decision. She couldn't let Cameron sacrifice everything he had built, even if it meant breaking both their hearts. The shareholders' meeting was packed. Richard Sterling had rallied enough support to force a vote on Cameron's leadership. The plan was clear: paint Cameron as reckless and emotional, unfit to lead a major corporation. But Cameron had his own plan. "Before we vote," he announced, "I'd like to present the quarterly results from our newest division." On the screens, Lyra's technology demonstrations played. Then came the numbers. Partnerships with 5 major Thessalon tech companies. 3 revolutionary patents filed. Projected revenue increases of 40%. This is what happens when we stop limiting ourselves to human-only innovation. Lyra Vance didn't just create new technology, she opened a door to an entire market we've been ignoring. He clicked to the next slide. "I'm announcing today that the Experimental Technology Integration Division will spin off as its own company, Nexus Innovations. Lyra will be CEO, eliminating any conflict of interest. Sterling Tech will retain a partnership stake, but she'll have full autonomy." The room erupted in surprised murmurs. Richard looked blindsided. "Additionally," Cameron continued, "I'm transferring 20% of my personal shares to a trust that will fund interspecies workplace equality initiatives, not as charity, but as an investment in the future of technology." He looked directly at Richard. "You can vote me out if you want, but you'll be voting out the person who just secured the company's future for the next decade." The vote wasn't even close. Even Richard's allies couldn't argue with success. 6 months later, Lyra stood in the lobby of Nexus Innovations' new headquarters, watching employees from a dozen different planets collaborate on projects that would have been impossible a year ago. Her company had become a major success, partnering with Sterling Tech as equals. Cameron arrived for a scheduled meeting, but instead of heading to the conference room, he pulled her into the same elevator where they had first met. "Remember this?" he asked as the doors closed. "How could I forget? I insulted you for 10 minutes straight. Best 10 minutes of my life, because it led to everything else." He pulled out a small box, and Lyra's heart stopped. "I've been carrying this for weeks, waiting for the right moment. But then I realized we've never done anything the traditional way, so why start now?" Inside was a ring that perfectly blended human and Thesseron design, platinum woven with iridescent crystal from her home planet. "Marry me," Cameron said. "Not because it's expected or conventional, but because I can't imagine building a future without you." Lyra's skin shifted to a radiant lavender pink, the Thesseron expression of pure joy. Yes, obviously yes. As they kissed in the elevator that had started everything, Lyra thought about how wrong her first assessment of Cameron had been. He wasn't the arrogant billionaire she had imagined. He was something better. Someone willing to learn, to change, to fight for what mattered. "I'm glad I insulted you," she said when they pulled apart. "Me too, though maybe don't mention that in the wedding toasts." "No promises," Lyra replied, pulling him close again. Sometimes the best love stories started with the worst first impressions, and sometimes the man in the elevator was exactly who you needed him to be, even when you didn't know it yet.
But neither of them moved away. They stood in the quiet lab, the city lights of Chicago glowing through the windows, both knowing they were about to cross a line that couldn't be uncrossed. "Tell me to leave," Lyra whispered. "Tell me this is a bad idea." Instead, Cameron cupped her face gently. "It's probably the worst idea I've ever had, but I can't seem to care." When he kissed her, Lyra forgot every reason this was complicated. She forgot about power dynamics and office politics, and everything except the feeling of his lips on hers, his hands in her hair, the way he held her like she was something precious. They pulled apart, both breathing hard. "We need rules," Cameron said. "Boundaries." "Agreed," Lyra replied. "But maybe we can establish those tomorrow." Cameron laughed, the sound warm and genuine. "Tomorrow works."
Lyra Vance checked her reflection one last time in the lobby bathroom mirror of Sterling Tech Tower, making sure her concealing makeup was perfect. The foundation covered the natural lavender tone of her Thesseron skin, making her appear human enough to avoid the stares and whispered comments that usually followed her. The colored contacts changed her violet eyes to a more acceptable brown. She hated the disguise, but Earth's tech industry was still largely dominated by humans who preferred their aliens to blend in. She was already 15 minutes late for her interview, thanks to Chicago's unpredictable train system. Her worn portfolio bag hung heavy on her shoulder, filled with engineering designs and code samples she'd worked on for 3 years at a small startup that had just gone bankrupt. This job at Sterling Tech was her last chance to stay on Earth. Her visa was tied to employment, and without a new position within 30 days, she would be forced to return to Thesseron. The main elevator bank had a crowd waiting, but Lyra noticed a separate elevator with brass doors standing open and empty. A small sign read, "Executive Access," but desperate times called for desperate measures. She darted inside just as the doors began closing. The elevator was absurdly luxurious compared to the standard ones. Wood paneling, soft lighting, even a small bench along one wall. Lyra was adjusting her bag when she heard running footsteps. "Hold that, please," called a male voice. She hit the door button, and a man slipped inside. He was tall, probably early 30s, with dark blonde hair that looked like he had just rolled out of bed. He wore faded jeans, a gray t-shirt with a coffee stain near the collar, and beaten-up sneakers. A maintenance worker, or maybe IT support, Lyra guessed, relaxing slightly. At least she wouldn't have to make awkward small talk with some corporate executive. "Thanks," he said, flashing a warm smile. "You're a lifesaver. Which floor?" 23rd. Executive offices. "Same here." He pressed the button and leaned against the wall with easy casualness. "Job interview?" "That obvious?" Lyra gestured ruefully at her outfit, a suit that she had bought second-hand that didn't quite fit right. "Just a guess. You have that nervous energy." His eyes were kind. "What position?" "Junior systems engineer for the new quantum computing division." She paused. Then the stress of her morning came pouring out. "Though honestly, I'm not even sure why I'm bothering. Everything I've read about Cameron Sterling makes him sound like a nightmare to work for." His eyebrows rose with interest. "Really? Do tell." And just like that, 3 years of frustration with Earth's corporate culture found an outlet. Where do I even start? He's one of those trust fund billionaires who inherited his father's company and thinks that makes him a genius. Every interview mentions his innovative vision, but from what I've seen, he just throws money at problems and takes credit when his actual engineers solve them. "That's quite an assessment," the man said, but he seemed more amused than offended. Lyra was too wound up to stop now. "And don't even get me started on his attitude toward non-human employees. Sterling Tech has exactly 3 Thesarans on staff out of 2,000 employees. 3! But he loves to give speeches about diversity and inclusion while doing absolutely nothing to actually support alien workers." "Maybe the qualified alien candidates don't apply," the man suggested. "Or maybe they do apply and get filtered out by biased hiring algorithms and human managers who don't trust anyone with purple skin. I've been on Earth for 5 years. I have 2 advanced degrees in quantum systems and 3 years of experience. But I've applied to Sterling Tech 4 times before and never even got an interview until now. What changed? Probably some PR person realized they needed to at least pretend to interview non-humans." The elevator climbed smoothly upward. He watched her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "You seem very passionate about this." "Because it matters," Lyra said. "People like Cameron Sterling sit in their ivory towers making decisions that affect thousands of lives, but they have no idea what it's actually like for the rest of us. He's probably never struggled financially, never faced discrimination, never had to work twice as hard just to be seen as half as good." "You've really thought about this," the man observed. "I've lived it. And I'm tired of pretending that billionaires who play with technology like it's a hobby are somehow more qualified than people who actually understand the work." The elevator dinged, announcing their arrival. The man straightened up, and Lyra noticed for the first time that despite his casual clothes, he carried himself with a certain confidence that didn't quite match the janitor image she had assigned him. "Well," he said, as the doors opened, "I hope your interview goes better than you expect. And for what it's worth, maybe Cameron Sterling is more aware of these issues than you think." "Doubtful," Lyra muttered, stepping out into the hallway. "But thanks for listening to my rant. Sorry if I talked your ear off." "Don't apologize. It was enlightening." He smiled again, that warm expression that made his whole face light up. "Good luck, Lyra Vance." She blinked in surprise. "How did you know my name?" But he was already walking away down the corridor, raising one hand in a casual wave. Lyra shook off the odd encounter and followed the signs to the executive conference room. The receptionist, a poised woman with perfect hair, checked her in and gestured towards a set of glass doors. "They're ready for you, Miss Vance. Mr. Sterling is conducting the interview personally today." Lyra's stomach dropped. The CEO himself was interviewing for a junior position? That was unusual, and probably meant he wanted to personally reject her application as some kind of PR gesture. She squared her shoulders, lifted her chin, and walked through the doors with as much confidence as she could muster. The conference room was all glass and steel, with a view of Chicago's skyline that would have been breathtaking if Lyra's attention hadn't been immediately captured by the man sitting at the head of the table. The man from the elevator. He had changed into a perfectly tailored navy suit, his hair now styled, the coffee stain mysteriously vanished, but there was no mistaking those blue eyes or that slightly amused smile. "Miss Vance," he said, standing and extending his hand. "I'm Cameron Sterling. It's a pleasure to finally meet you." Lyra's face hot beneath her makeup. Her mind raced back through every insulting thing she had just said about him. Trust fund billionaire, throws money at problems, sits in an ivory tower, has no idea what it's actually like for the rest of us. "Oh God," she whispered. "Oh no." Cameron's smile widened. "Please have a seat. I think we have a lot to discuss, don't you?" Lyra stood frozen, her mind screaming her to run, apologize, or possibly just melt into the floor. Cameron gestured to the chair across from him, his expression unreadable. I'm so sorry," she managed. "I had no idea who you were. I would never have said those things if you'd known I was the person you were talking about," Cameron interrupted. "But that's exactly why what you said was valuable. You were honest." "Honest or not, it was incredibly rude and unprofessional." "It was passionate," Cameron corrected, opening a folder in front of him. "And based on legitimate observations about our hiring practices." He looked up at her. "Your credentials are exceptional. 2 doctorates in quantum mechanics and xenotechnology integration. Lead engineer on the Nexus project that revolutionized cross-species data transfer. Why are you applying for a junior position?" "Because no one will hire me for anything senior. My previous company went bankrupt, and the market sees me as a risk." Cameron studied her for a long moment. "What if I offered you something different? Not the junior role you applied for, but head of a new division, experimental technology integration, focused on combining human and alien innovations." Lyra's heart stopped. "What?" "You said I throw money at problems and take credit when engineers solve them. Prove me wrong. Take the resources, build something revolutionary, and get full credit for it." Cameron leaned forward. "I need someone who will challenge my assumptions, who understands both the technical work and the barriers alien professionals face. Someone who's not afraid to tell me when I'm wrong." "Why would you offer this to someone who just spent 10 minutes insulting you?" "Because you're the first person in months who's been completely honest with me," Cameron said simply. "Everyone else tells me what they think I want to hear. You told me the truth, even when it wasn't flattering. That's exactly what I need." Over the following weeks, Lyra discovered that Cameron was nothing like the stereotype she had created. He spent as much time in the labs as in boardrooms, asked questions that showed genuine understanding of complex systems, and listened when she explained Thesaurian technological approaches that could solve human problems. They worked late most evenings, surrounded by prototypes and holographic